October 1947. The sky over Washington, D.C. is choked with gray smoke. It is not the exhaust of industry or the clouds of a storm. It is the ash of burning archives. The Smithsonian is gone. The Lincoln Memorial is a pile of rubble, the seated giant smashed into white dust by heavy artillery. Walk with me down Pennsylvania Avenue. The street is lined not with cheering crowds, but with silent, weeping families kneeling on the pavement. German half-tracks roll slowly down the center lane. The rumble of their diesel engines is the only sound in the entire city. Look at the White House. The stars and stripes are gone. In their place, a massive red banner drapes from the roof to the lawn. A black swastika sits in the center, stark and terrifying against the white pillars. This is not a nightmare. This is not a movie. This is the timeline that was inches away from reality. This is the world where the American giant remained asleep. We are taught that the Allied victory was inevitable. We are taught that the good guys always win. But history is fragile. The only reason you are not speaking German or Japanese right now is because of one specific, overwhelming factor: money, steel, oil, logistics. The United States didn't just outfight the Axis. We outspent them. We outbuilt them. We bought the war. But what happens if you take away the checkbook? What happens if the factories of Detroit never convert to tanks? What happens if the United States is not the rich warrior, but a broke, isolationist nation that waited too long? But before we go deeper, let me ask you something. If you're holding your phone right now or watching this on your screen, have you subscribed yet? If you haven't, do it now. Subscribe to World War II Dark Secrets. To understand how the American Reich began, we have to look at the moment the United States lost the war. It wasn't on a battlefield in 1945. It was in a boardroom in 1941. In our real timeline, American industry performed a miracle. General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler stopped making cars and started making the engines of war. They produced more airplanes in a single year than Germany produced in the entire war. The United States was a rich warrior, a nation that could afford to waste bullets, waste fuel, and waste steel because we had an endless supply. We overwhelmed the enemy with sheer material mass. But in this timeline, that miracle never happened. Imagine a 1941 where the Great Depression didn't end. The factories of the Midwest sit rusting and silent. The workers are starving, striking, and broken. When the war in Europe begins, the United States remains paralyzed by isolationism. There is no Lend-Lease Act. There are no convoys of supplies sent to Great Britain. There are no destroyers sent to hunt U-boats. The American eagle keeps its head buried in the sand. Without American steel and American oil, Great Britain falls in 1942. Operation Sea Lion, the Nazi invasion of England, is a success. The royal family is executed in the Tower of London. The British Navy, once the ruler of the seas, is scuttled or captured. Without American trucks and American aluminum, the Soviet Union collapses in 1943. The Wehrmacht, fueled by captured Russian oil fields that the Americans never bombed, pushes past Moscow to the Ural Mountains. Stalin is killed in a bunker. The Red Army is liquidated. By 1944, the world is quiet. Europe is a fortress under the Nazi flag. Asia is a prison camp under the Imperial Japanese Army. And the United States stands alone. The American military in 1939 was smaller than the Army of Portugal. In this timeline, without the sudden injection of billions of dollars and the draft of millions of men, it stays that way. We are a nation of farmers and shopkeepers, armed with bolt-action rifles from the First World War, staring across the ocean at two superpowers that have spent a decade sharpening their blades. The attack does not begin with Pearl Harbor. It begins with the blockade. Germany and Japan, now the masters of the world's oceans, simply cut the supply lines. They strangle the American economy. Rubber from Asia, gone. Chrome from Africa, gone. The U.S. economy, already fragile, shatters completely. Starvation riots break out in Chicago and New York. The government declares martial law, but the police are out of ammunition. Then the invasion begins. It is not a surprise attack. It is a slow, methodical execution. The German Kriegsmarine, the largest navy the world has ever seen, appears off the coast of New York in the summer of 1946. They don't need to hide. The U.S. Navy has no battleships left to challenge them. The Luftwaffe bombers launch from captured airfields in Bermuda and Newfoundland. New York City is the first to burn. In our real history, American anti-aircraft guns and interceptor squadrons would have filled the sky with metal. We would have spent $1 million in shells to shoot down a $10,000 plane. That is the American way of war: expensive, wasteful, and effective. But in this timeline, the skies over Manhattan are empty. The Luftwaffe bombers fly low, lazy circles over the Empire State Building. They drop their payloads with terrifying precision. Lower Manhattan turns into a firestorm. The Brooklyn Bridge is severed, dropping hundreds of fleeing refugees into the East River. The Wehrmacht lands on Long Island 2 days later. There is no band of brothers waiting to stop them. There is no General Patton with a column of Sherman tanks. The American defenders are brave, yes, they are patriots, but they are fighting Panzer tanks with Molotov cocktails. They are fighting MG-42 machine guns with hunting rifles. It is a massacre. The Battle of Long Island lasts 6 hours. The Battle of Harlem lasts 2 days. By the end of the week, German troops are marching down Broadway. They set up their headquarters in the New York Public Library. They burn the books in Bryant Park. The smoke drifts up through the canyons of skyscrapers, blacking out the sun. But the horror is not limited to the East. While Germany tears out the throat of the American government in Washington, the Empire of Japan stabs the West Coast in the back. The Japanese Imperial Navy, fresh from their total victory in the Pacific, sails into San Francisco Bay. The Golden Gate Bridge, the symbol of American engineering, is not destroyed. It is captured. The rising sun flag is hoisted to the top of the red towers. San Francisco is spared the bombing, but only because the Japanese want the port intact. They need it to ship American resources back to Tokyo. The people of California are rounded up, not into prisons, but into labor battalions. Los Angeles becomes a war zone. The Hollywood sign is used as target practice by Japanese Zero fighters. The studios that once made movies about American heroism are turned into barracks for Japanese officers. The pincer movement is complete. The United States is cut in half. The remaining American government flees to Denver, protected by the Rocky Mountains. They declare the mountains a national redoubt. They promise to fight to the last man, but promises don't stop tigers. The reality of this timeline exposes the terrifying truth about World War II. It wasn't about courage alone. Courage is cheap. Every nation has brave men. The Germans were brave. The Japanese were brave. The war was won by the rich warrior. It was won by the nation that could build a Liberty ship every 4 days. It was won by the nation that could put a radio in every tank and a semi-automatic rifle in the hands of every soldier. When you take away the riches, the warrior dies. By the winter of 1947, the United States of America effectively ceases to exist. The Mississippi River becomes the border. East of the Mississippi is the Greater German Reich of America. The capital is New York. The currency is the Reichsmark. The language in schools is German. West of the Rockies is the Empire of Japan Pacific States. The capital is San Francisco. The currency is the yen. And in the middle, trapped in the starving, freezing mountains, are the last free Americans. They are not an army. They are refugees in their own land. This is the setting of our nightmare. The fall is complete. But the true horror is not in the invasion. The true horror is in the occupation. Because now the Axis powers turn their attention to the greatest resource the North American continent possesses. They don't want our land. They don't want our cities. They want us. They want the American worker. In our timeline, the American worker built the tanks that liberated Europe. In this timeline, the American worker is about to become the engine of the Nazi war machine. The enslavement of the American population is about to begin.
and it will be efficient, brutal, and industrial.
Life in the Eastern Zone is a study in gray. The vibrancy of American culture is dead. Walk through the streets of Philadelphia in 1948. The jazz clubs are boarded up. The neon signs are dark. The chaotic, loud, messy freedom of the American street is replaced by a terrifying order. The Gestapo establishes its American headquarters in the Pentagon. The building, once a symbol of American military bureaucracy, becomes the largest torture chamber in human history. The first thing the Nazis do is secure the industrial heartland. They don't bomb Detroit, they capture it. The Ford River Rouge complex, the massive factory that defined American industrial might, is seized intact. But instead of churning out B-24 liberators to fight tyranny, it begins churning out Panther tanks to enforce it. The American auto workers are not fired, they are conscripted. Imagine the morning shift in this American Reich. You wake up in a dormitory, not a house. Private property has been abolished for the conquered class. You put on a gray jumpsuit with a number on the chest. You eat a ration of watery cabbage soup. You march to the factory under the gaze of armed SS guards. If you were late, you were beaten. If you sabotage a part, you were shot on the factory floor, your body left there for the shift to see. This is the perversion of the rich warrior. The industrial capability of the United States is still there, but it has been hijacked. The vast resources of Pennsylvania coal and West Virginia iron are now fueling the Third Reich's global domination. The Nazis are efficient. They realize that the American highway system is excellent for moving troops. They finished the interstate highway system decades early, not for commerce, but to move mobile missile launchers up and down the East Coast. But the physical enslavement is only half of the nightmare. The psychological dismantling of America is far worse. The Nazis understand that to kill America, you have to kill its soul. You have to kill the idea that all men are created equal. The segregation laws of the pre-war United States are not just kept, they are industrialized. The Nuremberg laws are applied to the American South. It creates a hierarchy of horror. Universities like Harvard and Yale are purged. History books are rewritten. In this new curriculum, George Washington was an Aryan warlord who failed to keep the bloodline pure. Abraham Lincoln is demonized as a race traitor. The Statue of Liberty is modified. The torch is removed. In its place, she holds a sword pointing toward the heavens, a symbol of eternal war. The inscription, "Give me your tired, your poor," is chiseled off and replaced with blood and soil. Times Square in New York becomes the center of propaganda. The massive billboards that once sold cigarettes and soda now broadcast speeches from Berlin. Enormous screens show the glory of the German soldier keeping the peace in Boston and Baltimore. But the darkest secret of the Eastern Zone lies in the Midwest. In the vast cornfields of Ohio and Indiana, the smoke rises day and night. The Nazis bring their final solution to the American continent. They utilize the American rail network, the greatest in the world, to transport millions of undesirables to concentration camps built on the plains. The efficiency of American logistics, the very thing that saved the world in our timeline, is used to destroy it in this one. It is a grim lesson in neutrality. Tools are neutral. A train can carry soldiers to liberation, or it can carry victims to their death. A factory can build a tractor, or it can build a tank. In our reality, the United States used its wealth and power to become the arsenal of democracy. In this timeline, we become the arsenal of tyranny. Resistance in the East is sporadic and suicidal. There are whispers of underground groups, the Sons of Liberty, the Harriet Tubman Brigade. They operate in the shadows of the Appalachian Mountains. They blow up a rail line here, assassinate a local collaborator there. But they are starving. They have no outside support. There is no rich ally across the ocean to send them guns and money. They are fighting a total surveillance state with hand-me-down pistols. The Nazis respond to resistance with collective responsibility. If a German soldier is killed in a town, the entire town is liquidated. After the assassination of a local Gauleiter in Pittsburgh, the Luftwaffe firebombs the entire neighborhood. The message is clear. Resistance is death. Submission is survival. The American spirit, that loud, brash, confident belief that we can fix anything, begins to fade. A generation of children grows up knowing only the swastika. They learn to march before they learn to read. They pledge allegiance not to the flag of the United States, but to the Führer. And yet, as bad as life is in the East, there are those who whisper that the West is worse. Across the Rockies, the Japanese Empire is conducting a different kind of experiment. While the Germans value industrial order and racial hierarchy, the Japanese occupation is built on a code of absolute submission and cultural erasure. The West Coast is about to experience the full weight of the imperial harshness that devastated China and Korea.
The sun rises over a different San Francisco. The fog still rolls in through the Golden Gate, but the city beneath it has changed. The Victorian houses are still there, but the streets smell of incense and unwashed bodies. The Japanese Pacific states run from the Canadian border down to Baja. This is the prize of the empire. This is the resource bowl. The Japanese occupation is less mechanized than the German one, but far more brutal on a personal level. The Kempeitai, the dreaded Japanese secret police, set up their headquarters in the City Hall of Los Angeles. They don't use sophisticated surveillance technology like the Germans. They use fear. They use the sword. In this timeline, the Japanese treat the white American population exactly as they treated the populations of Nanking and Manila. Americans are forced to bow to any Japanese soldier they pass on the street. Failure to bow at the correct angle results in immediate beatings. The sidewalks are reserved for the occupiers. Americans must walk in the gutters. The rich warrior perspective is inverted here in the most humiliating way. The average American, who in the real timeline enjoyed the highest standard of living in the world, is now a peasant. The suburbs of Los Angeles, designed for automobiles and backyard barbecues, are turned into rice paddies and vegetable gardens to feed the Imperial Army. The swimming pools are drained and used as storage pits or latrines. The Japanese seized the oil fields of Southern California. This was their primary objective. In our real history, the U.S. oil embargo starved the Japanese war machine. In this timeline, American oil fuels the Japanese Navy as it patrols the Pacific, unchallenged. But the most terrifying aspect of the Western occupation is the cultural re-education. The Japanese do not just want obedience, they want spiritual submission. They ban the English language in public commerce. Street signs are repainted in kanji. They target the American obsession with individualism. They see it as a weakness, a spiritual rot. Groups of American children are taken from their parents and placed in imperial academies. They are taught the Bushido Code. They are taught that their ancestors were weak, greedy capitalists who deserved to lose. They are trained to be the janissaries of the empire, American samurai who will enforce the emperor's will on their own people. The resistance in the West is savage. It is centered in the Pacific Northwest, in the deep forests of Oregon and Washington. Here, the geography favors the guerrilla. Lumberjacks and former park rangers form the core of the insurgency. They don't fight with guns, they fight with geography. They trigger landslides to crush Japanese convoys. They set forest fires to burn out garrisons. But the Japanese response is biological. In our real history, the Japanese Unit 731 experimented with plague and biological weapons in China. In this timeline, they bring Unit 731 to California. When the resistance in Seattle becomes too troublesome, the Japanese aircraft drop ceramic pots filled with plague-infected fleas over the city. The Black Death returns to the West Coast. It is a weapon of terror that the rich warrior United States would have countered with massive medical logistics, vaccines, and quarantine zones. But the conquered America has no CDC. It has no hospitals. The city of Seattle is quarantined and left to die. The silence that falls over the Pacific Northwest is the silence of the grave. Between these two nightmares, the industrial slavery of the East and the feudal brutality of the West, lies the neutral zone, the Rocky Mountains. This is the land of the lawless. It is a buffer zone, a strip of wasteland that neither the Germans nor the Japanese think is worth the effort to conquer. Here, the last remnants of the old America survive. It is a place of desperate poverty. People live in the shells of abandoned cars. They trade scrap metal for canned food. It is a Mad Max existence in 1948. The former United States government exists here, hiding in a bunker under Cheyenne Mountain, but they are a government in name only. They have no power. They have no army. They are ghosts, arguing over maps of a country that no longer exists. They transmit radio broadcasts that few can hear. Keep hope alive, they say. The giant will wake up. But the giant is dead. The infrastructure that made the U.S. a superpower, the dams, the power grids, the highways, is all in enemy hands. The Hoover Dam now powers the Japanese factories in Nevada. The TVA dams power the German chemical plants in the south. The rich warrior has been stripped of his armor, his sword, and his gold. And then the final blow comes. The Germans and the Japanese are not natural allies. They are predators competing for the same carcass. Tensions rise. The border along the Mississippi bristles with weapons. The Germans have a secret weapon. In our real history, the Manhattan Project was an American miracle, a $2 billion gamble that paid off because we had the resources to burn. In this timeline, the American scientists were captured. Einstein was executed. Oppenheimer was forced to work for the Reich. The Germans finished the bomb.
It is 1949. The Cold War has begun, but it is not between the US and the USSR. It is between Germany and Japan, and the battlefield is North America. The Germans decide that the American question needs a final resolution. They want the West Coast. They want the total continent. On July 4th, 1949, a date chosen for its cruel irony, the Luftwaffe flies a single jet bomber, a HO-229 flying wing, over the Rocky Mountains. It does not head for a military base. It heads for San Francisco. The bomb falls. The flash is seen as far away as the neutral zone. The mushroom cloud rises over the Golden Gate. In a split second, the Japanese Pacific capital is vaporized. The rich warrior United States never used the bomb on its enemies in this timeline. Instead, the weapon born of American uranium is used to destroy an American city occupied by a foreign power. The destruction is absolute. Japan retaliates with its own horror, dirty bombs loaded with radioactive waste strapped to long-range submarines detonated in New York Harbor and Charleston. The North American continent becomes a radioactive wasteland. The German Reich withdraws to Europe, content to let America rot. The Japanese withdraw to their islands, their prize turned to ash. The United States is left as a hollow, glowing graveyard. The story ends not with a liberation, but with a whimper. The survivors in the neutral zone look out over the poisoned plains. They realize that freedom wasn't lost in a single battle. It was lost because they didn't value the strength required to keep it. This is the nightmare scenario. Now, snap back to reality. Look around you. Look at your home. Look at the street outside. It is easy to be cynical about the military-industrial complex. It is easy to criticize the cost of defense. But the man in the high castle scenario teaches us a brutal lesson about the nature of the world. Peace is not the natural state of affairs. Peace is a luxury paid for by overwhelming firepower. The reason the United States won World War II was not destiny. It was logistics. It was the Detroit auto worker who pulled a double shift. It was the frantic construction of the Liberty ships. It was the ability of the U.S. government to write a check for the Manhattan Project without knowing if it would work. We won because we were the rich warrior. We drowned the Nazis in oil. We buried the Japanese Empire under mountains of steel. In the real timeline, the United States produced 300,000 aircraft. Germany produced 100,000. Japan produced 70,000. That math is the only thing that separates our world from the nightmare I just described. The next time you see footage of a Sherman tank or a B-29 superfortress, don't just see it a machine of war. See it for what it really was, a down payment on freedom. Because in a world of wolves, the only safety lies in being the biggest, richest, most dangerous bear in the forest. The American Reich never happened, but the blueprints were there. The desire was there. The only thing standing in the way was the sheer, undeniable weight of American industry. History is written by the victors, but victory is written by the supply chain.